Here we are. What's up, everybody? What's up, Blueprint Church? Welcome again to Weekdays with Dhati. We are in week 11. I've stopped counting the days. I can't do it. I've stopped counting the days, but we are now in officially passing up week 11, going into week 12 of the COVID-19 virus. This is kind of where the birth of this has started. Like, once again, we are going to be taking a break starting in July. We'll be having something like the best of the weekdays with Dhati, but we'll be doing something. However, we are going to be taking a break in July, but we're going to be doing season 2, if we can say that. Season 2 starting in August. Starting in August. This is going to be the new and improved version of Weekdays with Dhati. So I'm really excited about that. Today, I am here with a special friend of mine, Stephanie Powell. So, Stephanie, welcome to Weekdays with Dhati.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Do you like the name, Stephanie? Be honest with me.
Weekdays with Dhati.
So,
not particularly.
Okay, good. I mean, it's okay. So maybe even in with that, we may come up with a different name for the show. So that may be something that we need to do. But so I don't know.
It's not awful. It's not,
Well, anytime someone says it's not awful, that's not really the standard that we're looking for here. We're trying to upgrade this.
It's kind of just, it's kind of neutral. Like, you hear it and you're like, oh, okay, but it doesn't catch you. It's not gonna it's not super memorable.
Okay. Well, not memorable, but not terrible. Okay. Thank you. So somewhere in between, not good, but not terrible. That's where we are. So anyway, let me go to the people to say what's up. What's up, Carly from Boston? Jason Dawson back. What's up, Jason?
Carly.
Hope you're doing well, Jason. Welcome, Loretta. Nice to see you. Alexis Coots. What's up, man? Good morning to you as well. Waking up early in Cali to get on. Jessica, it is week 14.
Yeah.
Well, it isn't week 14. It's week 14. Jessica corrected me. I thought we was in day 88, which makes it not 14. I don't know, Jessica. We got to check your math. I'm counting from March 14th. That's my official count. So just want you guys to know March 14th. You can fact check me, but March 14th is my start date because that's the day I became a homeschool parent. All right. So that's how I'm counting. All right. Sam Dula is watching. What's up, Sam? Anybody watching while waiting in line to vote? We are already voting already. Okay. That is good. What's up, Steph?
Yeah.
Carly, what's up? All right. Shiraz from Pakistan. What's up? What's up? Jessica says, count again. All right, Jessica, you count again while I'm on, and then you put it in there with a verified fact. Fact check me. I'm always about fact checking. We are about fact checking here. Yeah, I'm excited about today's topic, though. Today's topic, we have Stephanie Powell here, who's also a writer. Is that, you're a writer? Is that, can I go further?
I am a writer.
Or is that enough?
No, that's enough.
Okay, that's enough. All right. She is a writer. Everything that I have written, to a degree, everything I've written she is someone I love, trust, written with, so she is my editor. She's probably even editing my stuff right now. I need to work with Dhati with these openings. So all of these things, I'm just letting you guys know that Stephanie is that person. And so I am very grateful for her. Stephanie was also on Sunday. If you guys did not listen to our Outcry series, an authentic lament in the face of injustices, we've been doing that on Sundays. This past week, we've been talking about, we had an all-white panel. I had my wife, we had Chad, and we had Stephanie on. And so we thought that let's continue this conversation. Yesterday, we talked about this idea of being biblical. And again, we are going to lay a foundation for that in future times of what I'm talking about specifically. Because, of course, no one's going to disagree with me saying about being biblical. If you're a Christian on here, you're going to say, of course, we need to be biblical. What I'm ultimately saying is that in a lot of the conversations, I just don't see a lot of people using the Bible. That's what I'm saying. So, of course, everybody is going to say we agree with being biblical. I'm just saying that I just don't see people actually using the Bible when we're discussing the hard issues. All right, that's another discussion. That's not what we're talking about today. But I will give us examples. So if you were, and let me just put it this way, if I were to ask you specifically, what are the Bible verses that you would use in order to argue the stuff that we've been talking about. Like, what are those scriptures? What are those passages? What are those biblical references? That and have you been using them? Those are the questions that I have. I think there's so much that I've been really learning about the prophet and the prophetic laments, Galatians, Romans, all of these Bible passages. Because let me just tell you this, because we're talking about white evangelicalism, we're talking about white fragility today, specifically. We are talking about white fragility. And let me just tell you this. When it comes to kind of white fragility, when it comes to even white evangelicalism, if you're not equipped in using your Bible, they are going to shut you off. And let me just tell you the reason why. There is a fear, especially around conservative evangelicals, of things like YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, like a lot of the liberal seminaries. Whenever white evangelicals, the history of those denominations and so many denominations that have went liberal, that have stopped using the Bible, there is a fear. So if you begin your argument with a politic, a government, if you begin your argument with even statistics and all that, they're going to naturally kind of shut off and they're going to think you're going political on them. And this is why I think to become all things to all men, and I also think this is a good practice, is that we understand our Bible, because the Bible is very, very, very speaks a lot about racial issues, racial tension, ethnic divisions. It speaks there's a reason why we celebrate together Revelation 5, Revelation 7, when it says all nations and all tribes will come together. There's a reason why, because the Bible is saying that there's something that sin has divided nations and tribes and all that. So so the Bible is very clear, and it's not it's not a political thing. It is a very thing. But that's so use our Bible. And so we're going to talk about that in future. It is important that we use our Bible so we can become all things to all men and be able to express that. However, today we're talking about white fragility. We're talking about simply when we talk about issues of race, why do white people so easily, they get scared and they don't want to talk about it. They go, so Steph, why don't you kick us off with a definition, of white fragility, and then we'll get a chance to unpack that. And there's a great book that I'm basically have been reading called White Fragility. It is by an author named D'Angelo. And so, but this is not about unpacking her book. This is just talking about white fragility. But, that's just a book reference for you guys. So Steph, why don't you give us a breakdown and a definition of white fragility?
Yeah, so Robin DiAngelo is the author of that book, and she defines it, and she's kind of who made the term, I don't know if she came up with it or just made it more famous. I think she came up with it, but she defines it as the inability to handle the stress of conversations about race and racism, causing people to become hostile, guilty, defensive, or fearful when confronted about it. So it's kind of more like a more simple way to think about it is kind of just like a low tolerance for racial conversations. Yes,
that's good. A low tolerance for racial conversations would puts you in a defensive fight, flight, or freeze posture in terms of reacting because of the fear. One of the things that one of our members, and I've used this a couple of times, but one of our former members who now went to a different church plant, used to talk about this. And there was an interracial couple, and she was white, she was black, and they would talk about one another. And they said when they went to the black man's house, every single time he's just like, I've been over his house and around his family tons and tons of times. However, I can probably not count on one hand how many times race was not talked about at some point when I was talking. Now, so this is a minority family, and it says race always comes up. But then she says, but if I look at my family history and growing up, she says, I can remember counting less than 5 times of how many times I actually had the conversation. So I think one of the things is just simply the amount of reps. So whenever, there's all different other factors, but when it comes to kind of white fragility, one, you oftentimes see why do we keep on bringing, why is race always bringing, something that we're talking about? Why do we keep bringing this up? Why we keep making this an issue? By you bringing it up is making it an issue. So, Stephanie, when you think about that, well, like, are there merits to that? Like, when you hear that illustration or even that story, like, what does that kind of do to help you unpack white fragility or your understanding of it?
One of the things I think too, the other thing it makes me think about is I'm going to plug your book. In your book, Advocates, you talk about how fragility is kind of like being out of shape. And so if you have somebody who is a trained athlete and they're running a marathon, by the end of the marathon, they're exhausted, but they're exhausted because they've run the marathon. But if I were to go out and try to run a marathon today, I would be exhausted very early on because I have not trained and my body is not ready. I don't have the muscles. And that to me is a lot of times we don't have the muscles. And so we break down because we don't have the skills, we don't have the muscles, we haven't practiced. And because we haven't had, most white people have not had those type of conversations about race in the home with that level of consistency. And so it just, all of a sudden you're diving in. If you're saying, okay, I want to jump into this conversation, you recognize you're coming in to a marathon and you haven't trained for it.
Yeah.
And so it's, to me, there's a lot of looking at, okay, how do we move forward? And so I think one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is moving through white fragility and like learning to engage with my own fragility isn't about as much, for me, the focus isn't, I need to stop feeling the pain or the fear because I can't just shut off my heart and my story like that. For me, the focus is don't quit. Stay at the table, stay present, stay engaged. And so when I feel my fear, when I feel defensiveness, my counselor always tells me that defensiveness indicates that someone has stepped close to a wound. And so for me, like engaging my own white fragility, growing and strengthening my own heart in that area means when I feel defensiveness, I have to pause and ask myself some questions. What did somebody just step close to? What is that? And then be willing to do my own emotional work and not project onto the other person, to then say, you need to deal with my guilt, or now I need you to make me feel better. I have to own the work of my own feelings and stay at the table. And so for me, it's less about almost like toughening up. And I do think that over time, the work we get, our muscles get stronger. But it's not about not feeling as much as it is about doing the work of feeling, but staying present. I'm not going to, if you say something that is really hard for me to hear, or if I start reading a book, telling things that I'm like, you are unraveling my worldview, or you are challenging my worldview, I don't just quit. I stay present. It doesn't mean I have to agree, but I stay present, I stay engaged, I keep learning, I keep growing. But I just think that's kind of what I've been thinking a lot about in terms of white fragility is what do I do with it?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Like the idea of staying present, because there's there's an emotional response to staying present, but there's also a truthfulness response to staying present. Like, are you able to tell the truth about still what's going on inside your thoughts, and not moving to perform? Because there's one thing to stay present and perform, and there's another thing to stay present and tell the truth, right? And to confess, right? And I think that is an important thing. Because D'Angelo even wrote in her book, because talking about this fragility, she said that specifically talking to white people, your sensitivity is an obstacle to progress, right? It's an obstacle to progress, and how would you say that white sensitivity is an obstacle to progress?
I guess I would nuance it a little bit and just think, I would think how we respond to our sensitivity is the obstacle. Because if I'm, and part of this is just my own story, I've always been really, really sensitive. And that's always been a hard thing in my sibling relationships and whatnot. And we can't talk to you, you're too sensitive, kind of a thing. And I've had to learn that it's not about the level of pain or fear or anger that I feel, it's how I respond to it. And so if I'm really sensitive to something and I shut down and I pull away, that's a huge obstacle. Because how can we reconcile if I go the other way? We can't. If I turn my back to you and I say, you said that to me, and that was really, that I just can't handle it. I can't handle it. I'm too tired. I can't have any more of these conversations. I'm done. If I say that, well, we can't move forward. And so if I say, this is really hard, I'm having a really hard time because I'm not used to having these conversations. Can I have a minute and then let's keep going? Or even just, I'm going to keep going. I'm having a hard time, so I'm going to stop responding because I'm coming from a place of defensiveness, but I'm going to listen still, and then I'll circle back with you. But whatever that looks like for you, staying engaged to me. But when our sensitivity leads us to withdraw, to run away, to become apathetic, to become passive, or to become aggressive, all of those things.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good, because so what you're saying is like, it's okay to be sensitive to what's going on inside. And actually, it's a good thing to be sensitive about what's going on inside, but it's how we respond to what's going on inside. Because there was a statement that Chad made this past week talking about how white people need to toughen up, right? And to some degree speaking to this idea of fragility, right? And obviously I know like people can take that in, the wrong way or whatever. It's just kind of like, because sometimes when you say toughen up, it just means be callous, like, get over it, suck it up, like, but I don't think that was his heart. But what do you think when he's talking about this idea of toughen up, and how do you remain sensitive, but at the same time remain present?
Yeah, and I think what he had said was about like having thicker skin. And what I hear when I hear him say that is kind of going back to that marathon analogy, is train your muscles. We need to train our muscles. We need better running skills. If you're entering this marathon, you haven't trained, but let's train. Train your muscles, do the work. We can take that analogy, however, but so it's about getting strong, better skills, growing our endurance, growing our capacity, strengthening our willingness to stay engaged, more than it is about don't feel. You're going to feel, and your feelings are actually, I think, what's going to lead to the most impactful. I cannot do this work if I don't feel. If I shut down my heart, I'm out. I'm out, and I'm numb to it, and I can't empathize, and I can't connect. And so I need my sensitivity, because that's what allows me to empathize with an experience that I don't have. I cannot be Black. I cannot experience it. So if I shut down my sensitivity, then I lose my ability to empathize. So I have to respond intentionally with my sensitivity and stay engaged. To me, that's the big thing, is to stay present.
That is good. Thank you, Stephanie. We're talking with Stephanie Powell. We are excited to have her on. We're talking about white fragility. The idea. We're later on in the week, we're going to be talking about minority fatigue, but today we're talking about white fragility, and we're talking about how white fragility is actually the essence of it is like when our sensitivity causes us to avoid conversation, or puts us in a defensive posture that creates this fight, flight, or freeze mentality whenever we're talking about that. But then what Steph is talking about is that the need for us to be sensitive about what's going on inside, but be also emotionally and spiritually healthy to not allowing your emotions to take you where you don't want to go. And that's what we're constantly are talking about on here. It's like emotions are a great place to tell you where you are, but they're terrible decision makers. So it's good for you to do check-ins, but don't allow your check-ins to now determine you. God gives us something different. He gives us the Holy Spirit. He gives us the Word of God, that we have. So I would love to hear from you guys. I would love to hear from you. What are some of the things that you guys are saying? Like, what are you feeling on here? We got Edgar Rodriguez all the way from Chicago getting on. Patsy's on here. Vicky, what's up, cuz? How you doing? Loren is on here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Xavier is on here. George, Stacy, Shane, Kyles is on here. Jossie, what's up? Hope you are doing well. Vicky says this. She says avoidance feeds fragility, right? And that kind of goes into the flight aspect of it. Is that like if every time this comes, if I just says, why are we having this conversation? Let's go. Let me tuck my head and run. Instead of doing the check-in, it's like, what? Like I may have the desire to want to leave, but what's the feeling and the need that I'm trying to answer and solve that's causing me to want to leave, right? And so, like avoidance, and so I think that is critical.
And sometimes you're going to have to stay when you don't feel like it, and that's the thing, that not letting your feelings control. In the same way, when you're training for a marathon, some days you run further than what you think you feel like. You stretch yourself, you push yourself. And so I think that it's not we're always going to feel like having the conversation. We're not.
Yeah.
But you do it anyway, because it's what are you committed to? I'm committed to unity. I'm committed to anti-racism. I'm committed to the gospel. And so because of those commitments, I stay when I don't feel like it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. That's one of the things that we're doing is it's like, and if you just add to that every day, so like I'm trying to get my kids back into shape. Like we're saying, like, all right, y'all, we get putting on this COVID weight. It's time to start building back to being athletes, getting ready for school. And so what we're doing is every day. It's just like, hey, we're working out every day. And today you may only be able to do 10 push-ups. But tomorrow, let's try it for 11. And then the next day, 12. But like, let's just keep adding. Yeah. Let's not like worry about like our goal. Like for me, my goal is like I'm trying to get back to 30 pull-ups. You know, right now I can do about a good 10. Right? I'm like I've lost it, but I remember it's like I'm gonna keep building up to getting there. And that's the same thing that what you're saying is that like the more you are engaged, the more you are being able to tell the truth about what's going inside, being sensitive to what's going on, but then not allowing your sensitivities to your feelings to control you, the more you will be able to connect in that real way. Loretta says this, Stephanie. She says, Stephanie, what are some practical ways that you think or would like Black people to be sensitive when having these conversations with white people?
That's a really hard question for me to ask, because I don't think that the burden of responsibility, as far as when I'm thinking of emotional healthy boundaries, it is my job to deal with my feelings. It is your job to be present with me and deal with your feelings. And so, and at the same time, I get it. We can show kindness to one another. And so for some people, I'm really hesitant to even answer it. I really am.
Let me answer it as you think. Do you think more about it? Because I do think that to some degree, as African Americans, I think it's really important for anybody, and this is not even just in race, but any hard situations, whether it's with a spouse, with anyone, but it's always good to create like safe spaces. And I know that's a word that minorities don't even want to like I don't want to be a safe Black person. And we've talked about that last week with Jackie. I don't want to be a safe Black person because a safe Black person means something that, but ultimately what I'm saying is safe. I think the difference between a safe environment doesn't mean that you're not going to hurt, but what I'm saying is that I'm not going to harm you, right? And so if I can create a space by even just saying something that's simple to you, it says, hey, I just want to give you an area. You may say things that I disagree with you, and I may say things that I disagree with you, Steph, but let's just create a space, and I'm committed to you. I'm committed to going through this with you. I'm not going anywhere. Like that to me is a safe space, right? That's a safe space that I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to speak the truth in love. And if I'm speaking this truth in love, it may hurt you at some points, but I'm not trying to harm you. So I just think that being able, so that's one practical way of just saying, like just simply framing the conversation. I want this to be a safe space, right? I'm not going anywhere. I want this to be a safe space, but I want you to be honest with me. I think that is, and I think that will just give some type of courage to show up. It doesn't mean they're going to show up, but it gives them some type of courage to show up. I think that would be a practical example.
Yeah. Another practical thing would be clarifying terms, because for most white people I know who are just beginning to dive into this issue, the word racist means KKK member. Those two things are the same. And so if you're beginning a conversation with someone who is new to this conversation And that's what they hear. If you say, you want to talk to me about your racism, then if I hear that, I'm thinking, you're accusing me of being a Klan member. I'm not a Klan member. And so I'm going to get very defensive if you accuse me of being a member of the KKK, because I am against that. So that type of, so I think clarifying terms can be a really helpful way to make sure that you can have a conversation about what you're trying to have a conversation about, and not distracted by these peripheral things.
Yeah, because I mean, like, there's a word right now is they're talking about racist and anti-racist. These are some of the words that are being used. It's not enough for you to say you're not racist. The question is, are you anti-racist? So being able to define, what does that mean to be anti-racist? How are you defining that? Because we're using these words and we just assume that everyone is on the same page, but all words have connotative and denotative meaning. There's a definition for them, but there's also when I hear them. When I just, so like when I first heard the term, I just thought it means I need to be against racism, anti-racism, against racism, which most people, white people would say, yes. However, the anti-racism movement is something more than that. It's about defining disparities. How are you proactively doing it? And so it's a lot more than that. So being able to define terms, I think, is a critical thing for us to be able to do. So I think that's good. Alexis says this: how do you help white men who use sarcasm or call people of color soft in these conversations because they ultimately are avoiding and probably are being fragile? So you don't just shut down the conversation. So that's kind of the fight, when we talk about the fight, flight, or freeze, that's one of the things that we just fight. Like, let me just create a narrative. So, or they try to avoid the conversation. They say, well, morals is something that needs to be taught in the home. It's sort of like, if you say that this, things like this need to be taught in the home, you're just saying that we don't need to have this conversation together. So there's the avoidance technique and all that. And, why we keep on talking about race? So what would you say about that? People who take more the avoidance route, the freeze, let's not talk about it, I feel uncomfortable, let's not talk about it in this space, or the aggressive approach and saying that you're always bringing up, you're playing the race card, you're soft, so on and so forth, but ultimately trying to avoid. That's kind of what Alexis is getting at. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the response is going to be very different depending on your relationship with the person. If this is somebody in just a casual conversation and responding that way, that's a different response than someone like a friend. Because I think the ultimate goal would be to press in and say, hey, I'm noticing you're deflecting. Is there something you're trying to avoid here? What does it make you think about? What are you feeling? And if they're willing to engage that, then that's really good. That's a really good place to be. A lot of times if someone's deflecting, they may not be ready. And so, but an awareness that they're doing it is an important start too, to just say, hey, did you realize that when I asked you this, when you said this, that's a way to deflect. And so the conversation I wanted to have about you and me and this, whatever you were trying to, you moved away from it when you did this. Did you know that you did that? So finding a way to bring awareness to it, I think, is important. If they're ready to press in beyond that and willing, I think that questions that lead to that are really valuable. But obviously that, depends based on.
And we're used to that. We're used to that as believers. We're used to that. Anytime people create in hard conversations, people have used and are using avoidance techniques, in so many different ways. And I think, again, it comes back to being able to stay present. And again, whenever we're having these conversations, the big thing that you got to understand is that you can't fix anyone, right? Like, we're not God and the Holy Spirit. He is the fixer. He is the one who can shape and to change a person's heart. I think one of the things that's really important for you to do, Alexis, in that situation is to say, okay, them coming off aggressive at me is making me feel a certain way. And so that you respond appropriately and not try to fix them, but you say, hey, they're, how just what Stephanie was saying. But I just think that keep doing the work within. Where am I? What do I need? Where am I? What do I need? That'll help you a lot to stay engaged and to be present in these types of things. Shane says this: genuine relationships strengthen us as a whole. We need to listen equally. Yeah, the idea of connection is so critical. Seek to understand before trying to be understood is a critical principle. And I think genuine connection, genuine relationship in so many different ways is critical for us in order to overcome. And it's another way to create those safe spaces. And, you know, and like in the proverb says, blessed is the wounds of a friend, right, than a kiss of an enemy, right? Like, I would rather you hurt me, not try to harm me, but you hurt me, right, because you're telling the truth. You know, and to some degree, like the old shepherds of old, they used to have a staff in one hand and a staff in one hand and a, what did they, the other? Rod in the other hand. And so what they would do is that with the rod, that sometimes they would gently nudge the sheep over, but sometimes they would have to strike the sheep and they would have to genuinely hurt him. But the whole idea was, I'm going to inflict a hurt on you now so that you don't experience a greater harm later, right? Because if I didn't strike you with this rod, you were about to go off the cliff, right? That's the idea of disciplining. You know, some people who believe in, you know, disciplining their children, don't spare the rod, right? It's the idea of you do this smaller discipline so that they don't have to experience a greater discipline later, you know. And so again, I don't think you go into any conversation trying to harm or trying to fix anyone. You go to every conversation trying to be present, speak the truth in love, give dignity, be biblical, and but at the same time speak the truth in love. And that in that process, in speaking the truth in love, you may hurt someone, you may bring sadness to someone, you may bring anger, you may bring those things. But I think it's critical. Angie says this, as a white person, I would like to feel safe when speaking to any of my friends about anything difficult. I want to know you will not leave me, abandon me. I love being challenged, but please love me during it. Also, I would say practically, do not generalize with me. You guys, always, never type words are hard to hear. So yeah, that's one thing we talk about in marital counseling. Anytime in marital counseling, you know, or just in anything, whenever you use the word always, never, like those are just not words that are helpful. It puts people in a defensive posture. You always do this. You never do this, like, because partly it's probably not true. You always leave the toilet seat up. Like, that's probably not true. There has been a time where I did not leave it up. So you always forget about me. No, actually yesterday. And then again, then the argument becomes about something different. So like staying away from these all-encompassing words, I think is critical. Yeah, so that's good. Angie Price says that's helpful. Intentionality clarifies things. Shiraz says this, Steph. He says, for me, I take the case as a minority and majority than white and black. Racism is one of the factors of discrimination in Pakistan. When saying to have a safe place, does that mean not to speak up the right and just, and if you do, you get in trouble? So basically what I'm hearing them say is that the idea of when do we speak up, you know, it's because he's talking about discrimination as a whole. There's so many things that divide right now in America. We're just talking about Black Lives Matter specifically because that's the issue that we're talking about, and, you know, all those things. But he's just talking about in discrimination. When do you speak up, especially if you're taking a passive posture? Because oftentimes, you know, as a white, we have heard over and over again, be patient. It's going to take time, you know, and we know that this, like, we've been hearing the same thing as a minority, been hearing this for the same thing for years. And we're going to talk about this in minority fatigue. But like, if your fragility is causing us to prolong the conversation or avoid the conversation, how do we address that?
That to me goes back to boundaries of, please don't be controlled by my weakness. My weakness in this area, I'm with you and I want to be with you, but also we can't wait for everyone to be ready. You just, and sometimes you learn by jumping into the deep end. And, you know, I'm not going to be alone there. My friends are with me. I may not know how to swim, but we've got to go. And so to me, when I think about how to know when to respond, it's more about being strategic than about we know biblically because of the fall, things move towards disorder. We know, like when you said before, like passive disobedience is active rebellion. We are on a conveyor belt that is pulling us away from kingdom likeness in our world, in our societies. And so if we aren't actively moving against it, we're going to drift towards a worldly lifestyle, of worldly things. And so we have to be actively moving against it. And so I think that we move forward with kindness and love, all of those things, but you move forward. You fight for the kingdom.
And I think by being able to ask the questions, where are you? Some of the things that we're talking about, allowing them to understand. There's obviously a fear pattern in there, but being able to unpack that. And I think there's times, and when we talk about the APES ministry, apostles, evangelists, shepherds, prophets, like everybody doesn't need a prophet. Right. Some people need to be shepherded into this conversation. Some people need to be taught and educated into this conversation. Some people need to be evangelized, if I can use that, into this conversation. Like, you see what I'm saying? And so we can't use like one mode. Like if I just speak fire and brimstone, that's good. So communication is a two-way thing, and it's really important for us to be able to do that. We got about a couple minutes left. Let me go through some of the comments, and then we can kind of wrap this up. Thank you guys for interacting with us about white fragility. I'm here with Stephanie Powell, writer extraordinaire, friend, lover of God. Is that a good description? Lover of God, mother, wife, all of these things.
Director.
Huh?
For reference for people, I'm also the next gen director at Blueprint.
And the next that is next. That is. I said everything about except that one. You're right. Okay. All right. Loretta says this. There's definitely a need to be appropriately sensitive to white people in these conversations and times without diluting the content of what needs to be said or done. We can't just crush and smash you to pieces with no regard. Sure, sometimes you'll be offended and hurt for sure, but that can't be our goal, not as Christians. Amen, Loretta. Angie says this, Angie Price, having an understanding of healthy shame has been so helpful for me in this conversation. It brings awareness of my deficiencies, ability to listen, humility, and discernment. I think that is a great, great comment, because when I know that I'm human and I don't have it all, you don't have it all, but together we can have more. I think that's an important thing. But if we are trying to act like I'm just here to teach you or you're just here to teach me, I think that's where the problem is, that we are both beautiful and broken, and I think that's good. Vicky, what's up, cuz? She says some people believe racism is defined for people who are overt with their actions. Yeah, there's actually, the book White Fragility talks a little bit about this, and there's tons of books that are talking about this. But the idea of racism, anti-racism, you guys got to read it. I'm still trying to determine where I'm at with this racism, anti-racism, and just theologically, where people are, because some people, I'm still processing it. So I'm not going to talk about kind of where I'm at right now with that. But Sherez is very right, Dhati. Yes. All right. Paul, and we'll end with this, says this: as a white man, how do I deal appropriately with the anger I feel towards other white people who seem so blinded? You're closer to a white male than I am. Which makes me closer? Am I closer because I'm a man, or are you closer because you're white? Okay, go ahead. You don't have to answer that.
It would depend on the topic of conversation.
You don't have to answer that.
Because they're talking about white people, probably me, because they're talking about white people.
Okay.
But, I would say you do with your anger what you do with your anger about anything else. And that is find healthy release for it. Give it to the Lord. Let it drive you towards passion. Be mindful of you have to do your own work there. And for me, anger is one of the most painful emotions to feel. It is one of the most vulnerable to feel, because it shows how much you really care about this. And so it's easy to quit and suppress it and become depressed about it. It's also easy to rage out and just try to take everybody out with it. And so I think giving that to the Lord and going, I know we're over time. I'm going to tell a quick story about somebody I knew who, they had a friend who, I forget what their name was, but they were like, their name meant warrior, and they were like, they were experiencing a lot of issues with, they were a church leader, and they were experiencing a lot of issues because people were just having a really hard time with how they were, their leadership. And he took some time off and was praying and was like, Lord, I just always thought you told me to be a warrior, and now I'm getting all this, like, people are against me and telling me I'm doing all these things wrong. And he felt very clear the Lord say to him, I did tell you to be a warrior, but be my warrior, not your own. And so for me, I think it's about, okay, Lord, how do I channel this anger for your agenda and not mine? And not channel it so that I release to feel better, but so that I purpose to bring forth change and to see reconciliation come. So I think we do with it the same we do with anger for anything else.
That's good.
But also acknowledge how hard and painful it is.
That's great. Great word. Great word. Again, we are with Stephanie Powell, the Next Gen Director of Blueprint Church. We are great. We talked about today white fragility, and just how do we do that? And hopefully that we have both comforted and confronted you when it comes to this, and that it's okay to be sensitive, but just don't allow your sensitivities to direct or to control you, right? Feelings are a great place to tell you where you are, but they're a terrible place to make decisions. So, so I appreciate you. Thanks, Steph. Thank you guys for joining us again. Until next time, we'll see you with Weekdays with Dhati. See you guys later. Peace.